Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful. Welcome to part 3 of the Racism in Our Community series put on by CIMIC. We want to thank everyone for tuning in, and this is part 3 out of the series. So part 1 and part 2, we highly encourage you to watch. And today we're honored to be joined by youth panelists in part 3 to share their experiences, their insights, their thoughts, and also their proposals for solutions going forward, which are things we desperately need. So with that, I want to thank the panelists for taking the time to be here. And I wanted to start out by just allowing each panelist to introduce themselves and also tell us a little bit about why you decided to be a part of this conversation, be a part of this panel. So we'll begin with Lateef.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm Lateef Bridgewater. I'm currently a student at Columbia College in Chicago, and as a Black Muslim, I feel like it's very important for myself to speak out on things that are going around me, especially in the community of Champaign. So I feel like my voice is important on a bigger scale. So.
Thank you, Lateef. Selma Alamin.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Selma Alamin. I am a 14-year-old student, and I attend Dean Homeschool Co-op. And I just really feel like this is very important to put our insight out there, help the younger people who look up to us, and tell everyone our opinion.
Thank you, Selma. Khadija.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Khadija Barro. I am 17 years old, and this will be my last year at Central High School in Champaign, Illinois. I really feel that this issue needs to be discussed because I've never really got to represent myself as a Muslim and as a first generation West African born in America. And I also feel that all Muslims, like us Muslims, we are different and we experience different things, each one of us. And I'm here to represent myself and talk about identities regarding religion, race, and etc.
Thank you very much, Khadija. Hozaifa.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Hozaifa Bhutta. I'm 15-year-old and should be a sophomore at University Laboratory High School. And the reason I think that this topic is important is I feel like recently the Black Lives Movement has been kind of rejuvenated in the last few months. So right now is the best time to know about this stuff if you didn't know about them before. Facts.
Thank you, Hozaifa. Salma El-Naggar.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm Salma El-Naggar. I'll be attending University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. I think it's important. This is a great time, especially with the recent events with police violence and other prejudice acts that have been happening in the country. This is a great time for us to educate the Muslim community and give them a different perspective of what it means to be a Black Muslim.
Thank you. And finally, Yusra.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Yosra Nadhimi. I graduated from U of I last year with my bachelor's in psychology. I'm currently in my gap year. And the main reason I wanted to be on this panel was to, use my role as a non-Black Muslim to educate those like me. And in general, social activism is something I've always been passionate about. So inshallah, I hope that we can start a good conversation today that can carry throughout the rest of, the time here to make good impact in our community.
Thank you so much to everyone for introducing yourselves. Just to give the audience a little bit of insight into how we're going to be organizing this evening, we will have a series of questions that the panelists will be addressing, and those questions are divided into 4 parts. So in the first part, we're going to be talking about reflections on the current moment. The second part, we're going to talk specifically about racism in our community, in our Muslim community. The third part, we're going to talk about education and what it really means to educate others, educate ourselves. And then finally, in the last part, we'll talk about what does lasting change really look like. So inshallah, with the first part, we're going to kick off by, I'm going to ask, how have you as Muslim youth been experiencing this moment as Muslim youth in Champaign-Urbana, and building on what you already discussed in the introductions of why you think these issues are important. But tell us a little bit about how you've been feeling, how you've been experiencing this particular moment.
I guess I've just, been really trying to, my whole life, my mom, even my grandma was a very, big activist, and she still does till this day work with Black Lives Matter to help the Black people in this community. And, so when I was younger, I was always taught to fight for people who are in need, and for myself, to know my rights and to fight for them. So I guess now that, I'm getting older and I just have more freedom to do more things, especially in this time. Everyone is paying a lot of attention on police brutality and a lot of the Black lives that have been lost. I just feel like it's very important to, just do everything you can to help the movement and to make it stronger, so we can get to our goal of having everyone equal, maybe, very, very far in the future.
Inshallah, won't be that far in the future. Maybe it'll come sooner.
I also feel like we're in a time where people need a change, whether they feel comfortable with that or not. And this is a time to educate yourself. It's a time to learn, build upon something new, like build a new foundation for something that you believe in. So I feel like personally in this time, I really just want to learn more, teach myself to be a better person and understand, empathy and, like love and compassion for people that are around me. So.
Yeah, also I think the Black Lives Matter movement are just, police brutality has reached a point, and all these other prejudice acts that have been happening in America, it has reached a point where people are tired and people are wanting for a change to happen. And in order for change to happen, it's important for us to educate ourselves and figure out what are the best possible ways to achieve that change. And so as a person, I've always been interested in social justice. And so seeing more people are becoming more aware of the racial problems that we have in America, and that America is not as equal between everyone as we think it is. This is like a great opportunity for me to make sure that I understand those issues.
Also, to be honest, as a young Muslim, we're in this age of social media where, you can find everything that's going on online in the screens, and lots of cases of injustice has happened before, as young Muslims, we can relate to Islamophobia and other types of attacks on us Muslims. But at the same time, like I said, we go through different experiences as as each individual in the Muslim community. I'm actually I'm a first generation West African, and my experience isn't the same as other young Muslims, because I know more about what it's like to not feel understood than some people may be. It depends on their intentions and what they think and how they understand things. But we go through different identities, because most of us, we have immigrant parents, or most of us are immigrants, and I go through the same experiences of having immigrant parents, but being Black and being Muslim, it's having many identities, and also being a first generation West African. So I really think that in this age of social media, during the age of social media, you can see everything that's going on, And I feel like as a Muslim community, we focus on like some issues and we protest about it or talk about it or have donations about it, such as like Yemen and Palestine, mashallah, mashallah, and Syria. And, you know, when it comes to Black lives, it's not like it's talked that much, but it's like mostly about general facts about Black History Month every year.
Thank you all for sharing your perspectives. And moving with that same idea, and most of you, or few of you mentioned that, you know, maybe you yourselves have been involved in social justice movements, or you have family members who have always kind of thought about these issues and have, you know, fought for these issues. But more recently, there have been certain events that have made a bigger population, or a bigger segment of the population in this country, more aware of those issues that perhaps we've been dealing with for a long time. So can you shed some light on what exactly those more recent events have been for people who may not be as familiar, or people who maybe they're not able to keep up with the news as much?
One event that has become super popularized is the holiday Juneteenth. It's not a national holiday, but so basically not a lot of people know what Juneteenth is. And so the history behind Juneteenth is that when the Civil War came to a close around 1865, there was still a number of people who remained enslaved, especially in rural areas in the South. And so the word of slavery, traveled throughout the country, but those, especially in those rural areas, still weren't freed. And so it wasn't until June 19th, 1865, this was the case in Galveston, Texas, which was a small rural town where thousands of slaves were still enslaved. And so it wasn't until the Union General, his name was Gordon Granger, came and then issued an order for all the slaves to be freed. And so Juneteenth is a day where we commemorate 4 million enslaved people finally being free, particularly those group of people in Galveston. And so Juneteenth also is like very representative of, it represents how freedom for Black people always has been delayed, okay, in terms, so even after slaves were freed, the decades after, what was followed was Jim Crow laws, segregation, and lynching and imprisonment. And then even after Jim Crow and the Civil Rights Act, there's mass incarceration, discriminatory housing policies, and a lack of economic investment. And so now, and what's happening now, the national attention has been focused on police violence, acts of police violence, and various racial profiling incidents. And so it has been clear that while progress has been made, Black America's like 150 years out of bondage, there's still barriers that prevent that progress. And so Juneteenth, especially after George Floyd's murder, became super popularized because it's important to commemorate like this huge monumental event in history. 4 million enslaved people were finally freed. And so it's important for people in America to celebrate Juneteenth because we as a country can like take a step back and then try to understand the Civil War through the eyes of enslaved people.
Yeah, speaking about like the delay, so the Emancipation Proclamation happened like a whole 2 years before Juneteenth, and that was supposed to record the end of slavery. So it kind of shows us that how it's a form of, I guess, institutional racism, where basically even though the law was there, it's that the slave should be free, it didn't really get enforced that well. And now there's like different stuff like gerrymandering, which some people call it a form of institutional racism, which is just like another instance of why Juneteenth is so important. Like some people call it like as important as like July 4th, because it shows that the slaves had the freedom, like in July 4th, America had its freedom.
Yeah, going off of that, a lot of people this year didn't celebrate July 4th because July 4th marks when everyone is freed, but there were still Native Americans who weren't freed and Black people in the country who weren't freed. So not everyone was free. So that's why a lot of people celebrate Juneteenth instead of July 4th this year.
Yeah, just going off of what you guys both said, I think it's really important to also say that even after everyone after June 19th, and all the slaves were freed, they still had this barrier on them. They didn't have, most of them were never ever, have never been free in America. And so they they didn't have the finances to go out, build a new life. And so most of them stayed on their plantation and lived their normal lives with maybe, just a little bit more money, for their hard work. And so, yeah, I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. You've all given us a very insightful history of not even just recent history, but even extending all the way back to the early days, the early years of the United States. And this history is not necessarily taught to everyone, especially, Muslims. There are Muslims who are born in the US, there are Muslims in the US that actually didn't grow up in the United States and perhaps really don't have this intimate familiarity. So I think it's really important that you're educating, you're bringing these issues up for people who are not necessarily familiar, and then hopefully people who are interested can also further do their own research and educate themselves. So moving to the next part, talking about racism within our Muslim community here in the US, which, a lot of people, they think about Muslims in the US, they think, we are a minority. So we would expect that our spaces, our institutions, within our Muslim community, that it would be a welcoming space. It would be a place where all Muslims from all different backgrounds could be together, could find support in each other. However, we know that that's not always the case. So I wanted to ask, as my next question to you all, have you, as young Muslims in Champaign-Urbana, experienced or witnessed racism happening within the Muslim community?
I personally have actually, on a few occasions, whether that be, someone coming up to me or my family and asking what we needed as we approached the masjid, or asked us, what are you doing here, while we were, coming to the masjid to get ready for prayer. Or even to be like very direct, I've been called a monkey or gorilla for my hair, or basically like, how I present myself in this community. And it happens often, and a lot of people like to keep it silent, and not really speak on what's going on, and like, oh, well, that's just what they do over here, so we're not going to talk about it. I've been told that, oh, you're too black to be a Muslim, or if you're not Arab, then you can't be a Muslim. You can't hang around us. And us as Arab Muslims, we disown black babies. So I've heard that on a few occasions, and it's never been right. So, and it's happened with people that I've known for years upon years. So.
Well, I haven't experienced any direct form of overt racism, but like, I'm pretty sure most of the people here have witnessed some form of covert racism, where they might not even notice it, but sometimes when people make a joke that isn't even intended to be racist, it does have a racist connotation. So like, that's just any form of like basic discrimination. Even if they like think it's a joke and they take it as a joke, whoever the victim of the joke is, it shows that it's racist. It's not a good thing to say just in general.
Yeah, I think a lot of it stems from the fact that that a lot of people think that only Arabs can be Muslims, and the fact that a lot of black people who come into the Muslim community are like either shunned or like told that they can't be Muslims, they can't be real Muslims because they're not Arab, and they are just treated very differently, when we all should be sticking together, because it doesn't matter what race we are, we're all Muslims.
Yeah, I can understand that, not being told that you can't be Muslim because you're not Arab. Well, I mean, you can be Muslim in basically any race, but I haven't like experienced direct racism either, but like I've experienced like racism like in front of me, or like some type of assumption because of my race. One time in my weekend school 3 years ago, I witnessed an individual saying the N-word, like it was okay to say it, and like someone looked at me and was like, and I didn't really say anything about it, and they didn't really like understand like why like you can't say it and why the topic of slavery is serious. And also I've like witnessed when like I'm in an Arabic class, some people assume that I'm not good at Arabic because of where I'm from and because I'm Black. So like, or like, oh, you can't read Quran well because you're Black, or anything like that. Like when it comes to Arabic classes, it's like the pressure is put on students whose origins aren't from an Arab country. So I would say like racism in like an area where I'm present. So yeah, not like direct blunt racism, just like internalized racism.
Thank you all for sharing those experiences, even though they're very difficult to listen to. And I'm sure none of the people in our audience are happy that this has happened, but thank you for sharing it so that we are bringing awareness that this is an issue. And, like was alluded to earlier, it's not necessarily just the overt, the direct types of racism that are going on, but also the more subtle forms of racism that we also need to be equally aware of. So that's my next question is, what are some of those more subtle ways that racism manifests, whether some people talk about microaggressions as being an example, or other forms of kind of more subtle racism?
That was just something like I kind of wanted to touch upon. Like Lateef was saying, or like Khadija was saying, a lot of the racism we experience in our community, or at least that I've witnessed from like Arabs or Desis or anyone who's basically a non-Black Muslim, is a lot of it is like these internalized like microaggressions that people say or do that they don't quite like realize in their head, like, oh, this is a racist activity. So like a lot of those microaggressions might be things that are just so normalized to you on a daily basis that, again, you don't quite see it, but to a person of color, to especially a Black person of color, like that is very offensive. For example, one type of microaggression is like colorism in Muslim communities, especially like Arab communities as well, where you might like favor, or you might like praise a child for being like light skinned versus dark skinned. So there's a lot of like inherent like colorism. Another type of like microaggression, things like people don't realize, like they might be like, oh, I am not racist, I've never done anything racist, but then in that same breath they might be like, but I wouldn't let my child marry a person who is like has a dark skin tone or something like that. So those are obviously like more like, I would say, significant cases of like microaggressions. But even saying things like, wow, you read Quran so well for a Black person, or wow, you were so educated, or anything like that, those are all little small instances of microaggressions that it's something that the Muslim community should become more aware of and like act upon to improve.
I also feel like, just simply saying that, like, Black, like, insinuating that something that could be Black culture is also haram. Like, oh, the way that you listen to your music, the way that you hold your hair, the way that you dress is haram. I feel like it's also, like slightly in that conversation as well.
Yeah, what Lateef just said, like I absolutely agree with it, because it seems like also like when it comes to culture and religion, it's like Arab culture is like, it's like people see it as more acceptable and appropriate than like, African American culture, or African culture, Caribbean, or any other culture that isn't really represented in the Muslim community. So I feel like culture and religion is like two separate things. It's just that like we need to like embrace the good aspects of culture, not like, oh, it's haram because like, oh, because it's Black. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I agree with you, Khadija. Like I feel like a lot of culture, a lot of Arab culture is put into as put into Islam, and because put into Islam, a lot of Muslims think it's the only thing that's acceptable. Like um, uh, Arab music is the only thing that you can listen to, or uh, you know, um, Arab clothes. Like if like what Lateef was saying, how he wears his hair, some people might see it as unacceptable or haram when it's really just him putting his culture out there and just trying to express himself.
Absolutely. I think you all did a great job articulating that and breaking it down so that it's really clear, that these things, even though people try to brush it under the rug, try to pretend, like try to look the other way, by saying it very clearly, we're starting to bring it to people's attention, bring it to the front of their minds. So another example that I wanted to also ask about is the use of certain words, certain racial slurs that people will use, and again, not realize how harmful, how hurtful they are. So what is the importance of understanding the history behind racial slurs, whether it's the N-word, whether it's also, we know that in Arabic, for example, some people refer to Black people as abid, and they might think that's normal. But what is the importance of understanding the history behind these words?
I feel like, it's just really important to understand history, because if you don't understand history, then you're not going to know why it's so hurtful. If you say, if, your aunt or uncle, or even you call a Black person abid, which means like slave, um, then it's very hurtful to them. And, it's like, it's not okay to say. But because it's so normalized, and you don't really think about it, your parents say it, or your family says it, why won't you say it? You don't realize why it's so bad, and you can't just do that from someone telling you, oh, you shouldn't say that. You have to realize why, realize the meaning behind it, the way it's hurtful to a Black person, and like the history. Same goes for with the N-word.
Yeah, I think the issue is, like, especially with the N-word, it historically it has been used as a racial slur, and what the argument that always comes up is, oh, Black people say it to each other, so why can't we say it? I think it's important to understand that Black people claimed this word, reclaimed the word, and use it as a greeting, or how they to call each other, like it's a substitute for like bro. But we, as a non-Black person, the implications of using that word is offensive, and a lot of people are like, oh, it's just a joke or whatever. Like it doesn't, you can't joke about something that has been offensive, that was used to, the N-word in specific was used to oppress white people, use it to oppress slaves, to make them feel inferior. And so us using it as like a casual word, thinking that there's no implication of it, is harmful and hurtful. Yeah.
I also, to go off that, I feel like it can never be just a word, because this is that word is, on multiple occasions, that like that's the last word that some Black people hear, as they're being, shot broad day by police officers, or unfortunately hung from trees. So I feel like it can never be just a word, because it like it's the meaning behind it, it's the message, it's the history, it's the torture, the torment that has been happening for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Yeah, I feel like many people who use the word, or like in songs, maybe they see it as just a word, and they're really just too arrogant to realize the history behind it, or even just try to find out the history behind it. A lot of people think that that it's this, like it's just it's just a word, but because it has so much history, and because it has so much hate coming past it, and till this day people are still using it to project hate to African Americans. It can't just be a word.
I absolutely agree with Selma. Um, not only the N-word is like used to like offend others, but I feel like the N-word is like used for like fun and to act cool. Like it's like among us Americans that we know about the N-word. It's like, oh, I can't say it, but it's like because someone has a black friend, that non-black person has black friends, and they say it like around them, and they try to act cool, and it's like, oh, I can say it, and it's like, no, it's not cool. Like it's like among us Americans, like whether you're Muslim or non-Muslim, the N-word is used by some people when they think it's okay, but really that's a word of trauma. No matter whether it's like it ends with the A or it's like the N-word ends with the R, you know, it was originally used as a racial slur to hate like against black people centuries ago, but now it is changed to like it's changed as a word where you can say it for fun, or it's like, oh bro, or like things like that. And for Abid, it's like used like among non-Americans and non-American culture. And that's right, it's like how people tend to normalize it, and it's like that still applies to the N-word in Arabic. So the origins of these words are actually trauma. It's just that it's been changed decades later as a way to like use it to be cool or like to have fun.
There was just like a couple of things I wanted to say, if that's okay. So like you guys are saying, like, even though the two words are separate, like there is two parts to it, but they're so interconnected in like how they're being used. Like, for example, for Arabs especially, like, and I directly want to address like Arabs who use the word Abid. Like, you may think like, oh, my parents just say this. It's just a way to refer to Black people. And I personally don't want to offend someone when I say it, but by you just implying that the only people who are like Abid or slaves are Black people, like, you're definitely going against Islam. We are all supposed to be Abdullah. For you to just like isolate it and be like, you know, obviously referring to Black people as slaves, like that goes directly against what the Prophet Muhammad said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said there's no superiority of an Arab over a non-Arab or vice versa, of a white over a Black. So for you to think that, oh, like, I guess you think like you're entitled to the ability to call someone else like Abid, like you're just going directly against what the Prophet is saying. And for parents, I feel like that, like, this normalization of saying Abid as like a, you know, as a reference to Black people, like that, you know, you might say that and you're going to pass that on to your children. And maybe you think to yourself, like, I'm not racist. I didn't do anything to teach my children hate or whatnot. But then your child goes on to do something racist. You have to realize that it all starts at home. And by you normalizing referring to Black people in a derogatory way, you are planting that seed for your child to go on and do more hateful actions. And so again, it starts at home. That's something you can do to fix it. And then just like in reference to the N-word, like, if you as a Muslim, like if someone tells you that a word is offensive to them and it's hurtful to them, then, you know, as a Muslim, you shouldn't be saying it. There should be no ifs or buts or anything about it. Like, if someone tells you something hurts them, you should just stop doing it. Like, there's nothing around that, you know? Yeah.
Thank you all very much. You've really clarified the issue, I think. For anyone who had any doubt or any confusion around it or hesitation around it, I think you've really clarified it once and for all. So thank you so much for doing that. And moving now to our third part, which is along the same lines, but now directly talking about education and how one does become educated. I want to ask you, as young people, how does your familiarity with social media affect the awareness that you have around racism?
So I'm gonna be kind of honest. I don't really trust social media and like a lot of stuff, even though I feel like sometimes I should be a bit more trusting depending on who posts the stuff, but most of the time I don't get my information from there. I try to actually like research it from credible news sources instead of directly from social media. So I think the whole entire problem is that the people who, like the owners of the social media place, they don't moderate the content that's coming through most of the time. Until like recently I heard some stuff with like Facebook, some ad companies were withdrawing from Facebook because Facebook wasn't moderating racist content. So overall, even if I don't think they've fixed it yet. So it honestly gives me just a distrust about social media, even though I probably should be trusting a bit more than I am, because there are some people there that are trying to give the right message. But it's always going to be a bit difficult, no matter like how good you are at distinguishing between fake news and real news. It's always going to be difficult to see what content is good and what content is bad.
I feel like it's really, you know, I know a lot of people, everyone I know has social media, and almost my whole generation has it. And even if you don't have it, you know, people around you, they know what's going on, and probably you know one or two people who are on social media and talk about it a lot. And so I feel like social media, there's just so many people on there, and it's just so easy to be taught, or, you know, teach someone what is wrong and what's right. There are a lot of people, I know that many people have been caught for saying the N-word or doing something, you know, very racist and derogatory to a minority, and they've been taught, they've been told, oh, hey, you shouldn't do that. Or and if they're, you know, arrogant enough to dismiss that, it's you know, they're still held accountable. And also just people who haven't done anything racist in their life, they just, you know, maybe don't know a lot about what's going on. There are so many people there on social media to, you know, help you and teach you what's wrong, what's right, why you shouldn't do this, or why, you know, why you shouldn't say the N-word. And, you know, just there are a lot of opportunities to do the right thing.
To be honest, I think that like social media can be like a really helpful source to learn about the awareness, but at the same time, it shouldn't be the only thing you should be relying on. Like social media, it can be helpful because like most of the people use social media, they get the information, but like you can just look at an article or like learn from someone who's experienced what they've experienced. And yeah, I mean, sometimes social media can be used in an irresponsible way, like posting fake sources or like saying bad things like in public. And it's like sometimes people aren't taking accountability for this. So like social media is great, but at the same time, like responsibility matters and your intentions matter. And I have non-Black friends who post about these things, but I mean, still, there are more things we can do, you know, donating, going to an article from a trusted website, other things too, you know. It's good to have a mix of every source.
I think though, yeah, like kind of going off of what you said, I think social media has been a huge, it's a really important part with the Black Lives Matter movement. It's been a great way to get people to sign petitions, get people more involved in social justice events like protests. It's been a really good way to advertise protests and get other people involved. I think, yeah, of course, yeah, social media isn't the best tool to get your education, but I think it's important in the sense where you get to see other people's opinions, people's views on certain issues. Also, I learned about Juneteenth from social media because people were talking about it. I didn't know what it was. Then I did my own research. Obviously, I didn't get everything from like social media. I use Twitter like every day, but like you learn about certain things, and then you can go ahead and like it depends on whether or not you're going to take that extra step to educate. But I think it has made me more aware in the sense of like for example, with the Black Lives Matter movement, I only know like Sandra Bland, Eric Gardner, the lives that were very much publicized, but there's been a lot of Black lives that have been lost to police brutality, people who are jailed because of a crime that they didn't commit from social media as well. Like Kendrick Johnson, they're still trying to open his case, and I learned that from social media. So I think social media is a great space for people to talk about issues that aren't talked about in the media, and then people, you know, can do their own research. But yeah.
Sorry, I was just gonna say one thing. Like, I think that for us, like, you know, as youth or like anyone who's able to get access to social media, it's definitely like an empowering tool that we can use to like educate ourselves. But it also, like, our usage of social media compared to like our parents or to our grandparents, social media definitely explains like the gap in racial awareness of like injustices that are going on. So I do think that it is like kind of on youth to like, you know, whatever you see on social media, obviously verify it, but then it's kind of on you to take what you're seeing and like disseminate it to the like to not to the elderly, but to those who don't have like access to that. Like, for example, there are so many things that like I only learned about, like you guys were saying, through social media that like even my own parents or family friends like weren't aware of. And these are things that like you can use to, again, raise awareness, to open people's minds, to educate them. So I definitely think like social media has a very big role in how we can improve like racial injustices in our own community as Muslims specifically.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that what you all have shared from, you know, kind of glimpses into your lives, you know, which are so social media heavy, which maybe other people can't relate to, older generations maybe can't relate to. And like Yusra said, I don't know if we should say that it's, you know, the youth's responsibility that necessarily to educate others, but it certainly is an opportunity that youth can decide to take on themselves to educate the older generation or people who are less familiar with issues that are outside of their immediate circle, which is what social media provides you, right? So you're aware of things that are not immediately affecting you. So along those lines, then my next question to you all is, how do you hold your people accountable and how do you educate them?
I think you call it out. I think you find out where they went wrong, and then you kind of show them where they went wrong and like what they need to do to change it. I feel like that's the only way you can hold someone accountable is like really tell them like I didn't like what you did and here's why.
I think the best way to hold someone accountable is to teach them the best way you can. You know, tell them why what they did is wrong and what they should do to fix it. And of course, there are some people out there who are very arrogant, you know, just don't want to listen. And, you know, sometimes you have to take it to a further extent. But I feel like the best way to teach people who, you know, maybe just don't know is to teach them and just tell them what to do next time.
I think the last thing you want to do is like get angry at them, and because then they're just gonna say that, hey, you know better than I am. So you need to make sure that when you're like, you know, holding them responsible, you need to be like respectful of them also, even though what they said, like no matter how bad the thing they said, it's just being angry or like shouting or screaming isn't going to help, or just saying insults.
I definitely agree. Like, I think, especially if you're like addressing someone who's, you know, in a lot of our cultures, like if you're addressing someone older than you, then you need to do it in like, you know, a respectful manner. But I think like Lateef was saying, the only way that you can make change is, again, it's uncomfortable sometimes, but just simply like ask someone, why are you using the word Abid, for example? Like, where does that come from? Why do you think that's a correct thing to say? And obviously, you know, if it's an elder, try to do it respectfully. And also you have to match the level at like how someone is acting, I would say. So like if someone says something offensive privately, it's just you and them, take that opportunity to privately like educate them and to privately explain like why what they're doing is incorrect. But if they're publicly, you know, acting racist on a public platform and, you know, they put themselves out in that sense and you've tried to educate them privately, then I think it is within your right to publicly like call them out and like ask like, what are you doing? Regardless, I think like the main thing that you have to do is really, like Lateef was saying, like just address it then and there. Like don't let it slide. So many instances people have let bad things slide, and that's kind of what like makes people think it's okay to be racist or it's okay to be discriminatory or prejudiced. So I think definitely like calling it out just then and there is the first way to fix things.
Yeah, I agree. I think we've now, like before we were really numb to certain things, and I think now we're becoming more aware of what things are not like acceptable, what is actually racist, what are microaggressions. And not everyone is educated. I think we're different than like our parents, for example, because the environments that we socialize in are very much different than where they socialize. And so they're in their little bubble, it's a very different social environment. And so while we might be aware of it and we might have been learned and like, you know, taught it, there's a little bit of a bridge that they need to cross for them to understand that. So calling them out respectfully is important.
Thank you all. And also another question that we want to talk about specifically for non-Black Muslims. How can non-Black Muslims ensure that they're separating culture and Islam when it comes to microaggressions? So, you know, in other words, another way of phrasing this question, like how can someone's culture actually prevent them from upholding Islamic ideals when it comes to racism, when it comes to microaggressions?
Just kind of like touching on the whole thing of like the overlap between culture and Islam. Like historically, so many people associate like Islam with Arab culture, but you have to realize like to an extent that is technically kind of haram, like for you to be conflating Arab practices with Islamic like practices. So I think just from the get-go, like separating culture and separating Islam is like one of the most important things you can do to realize that like, okay, Islam is not racist. Islam does not, like Islam, like we were talking about a little earlier, Islam is a perfect religion, but there's Muslims who conflate their own like cultural beliefs into it. Again, that goes back to the like how certain cultures refuse to let people marry like someone outside of their race or outside of their culture, or how certain Arab practices like will prioritize or put someone on a pedestal for being like lighter skinned or having lighter features or something like that. So a lot of those things come from Arab culture, but people integrate it into their Islamic lives and like their day-to-day lives as Muslims. So I think like for separating like Islam and separating your culture, like that's one of the biggest steps to kind of trying to get rid of those like built-in racist values that some people might have, even though they don't mean to. And then when it comes to like other things, like for example, we were talking about earlier how like some Muslims will see Black culture and be like, oh, that's haram, that's not okay. But you have to realize if you're going to tell someone else to separate their culture from Islam, you have to look at yourself first introspectively and see like what parts of your daily lives and activities are from your religion versus from your culture. Yeah.
Culture is like widely encouraged in our religion. It's just like the bad aspects of it, like I mean, there's nothing bad in the culture, but at the same time, the bad thing we have in our culture is pride, and pride is like very wrong, and it's not tolerated in our religion. Like people aren't used to like different cultures, or not open-minded to them. Some people, I say, like people, I feel like people believe that like Islam is like an Arab thing because of where it started in its origins. You know, it's a religion. It was founded in Arabia, but that doesn't mean that it's an Arab culture. It's not a religion where it's based on Arabs or any of that. Islam is a diverse religion, and at the same time, whenever we're born with our cultures, that's who we are. It's just that like people like have pride, and I think like just because Islam like the origins was in a specific place, like that doesn't mean like oh, I'm a better Muslim than you, I read more Quran, I speak better Arabic, my Arabic is so fluent and proper. Like, what's proper Arabic, by the way? It's like we have different dialects and languages everywhere. Whatever language you speak, no matter what, your relationship with Allah is the most important. And yeah, that's pretty much what I'm gonna say there.
Yeah, I think we should all, you know, because there's so many Muslims with different cultures, and so many Muslims that are from all different backgrounds, and I feel like we should all celebrate that and celebrate our culture. But you know, there's a very thin line from celebrating it and, you know, appreciating it, and then, you know, implementing it in Islam. Like, you know, we have to make sure that if we say something, it's not, you know, something that only our mom told us. It's something that's actually in the Quran, and that, you know, a lot of sheikhs say.
I have like, I know many family members that sometimes can't distinguish between cultural and Islamic hadiths, which is kind of sad. And also when you try to explain to them that there's a difference, right? Because sometimes people are raised with one way of thinking, right? Like small stuff, right? So it's difficult to explain to them that what they were learning isn't what the Book of Allah says, or it isn't what the Prophet said. So sometimes they get easily offended by those statements. So you have to be careful also.
Yeah, I think culture and religion always tend to bleed within one another, and sometimes people take something that's actually cultural and you take it as part of the religion, then use it as an excuse to be racist or judgmental or whatever. And so I think it really just takes for you to like reflect and figure and educate yourself as well. What is religion and what is culture, and making sure that you practice the difference between the two.
Thank you all. And moving now, I think this is a good transition into our last part, which is how we ensure lasting change. My question is about some of the things that people do thinking that it's positive. You know, they're trying to be more inclusive. They're trying to do something positive. So for example, perhaps during Black History Month, there will be events that are held, or perhaps people will post certain things on social media. So they don't want to look like they're ignoring what's going on. So maybe they'll like retweet stuff or repost stuff on social media. So they'll do those types of positive things. My question is that enough? Since we want to talk about lasting change, are those things enough, or do we need more? And if so, what do we need?
I think so. The main issue, based on what I understand, I think it's more just like Black History Month is great. It's a whole month where you learn about Black people. But I think the issue with that is like Black history is a huge part of American history. Black people are a huge part of American history. So it shouldn't just be like, oh, Black History Month, and then every other, like normally you just learn about American history. That's rejecting the fact that like Black people are a part of American history. Black history should be incorporated with American history. Yes, it's great that we have that 1 month, but we should do better in the sense where we can take that extra step and make sure that Black history is always implemented in, specifically it's always about history, like American history. We learn about Black mathematicians, Black historians, Black scientists. Also, like during the Prophet's time, the only Black Muslim that we really know about is Bilal radiallahu anh. And I think it's important to know that there was a lot of Black Muslims during the Prophet's time, but we just don't know about it because we don't talk about it. We don't think it's important. And I think to be inclusive, we should be talking about everyone and all different types of Muslims and history of all different types. And so, yeah. And then in terms of social media, there's issue about being performative activism. And so the issue was during, in a protest for George Floyd, people posted a Black square. And what they did was did the hashtag Black Lives Matter. And so what had happened is that all the posts regarding Black Lives Matter were blocked by these Black squares, and it took away from the movement. And so when people say performative activism, it's just like, oh, you put this Black square and you think that's enough activism for the day. Activism is like, for example, this conversation that we're having right here, trying to educate our community, that's important. That can help change. Reaching out to your leaders, community leaders, talking to them about these issues, that can create change. But saying, oh, like, a simple hashtag, while it is like, yes, you show your support, it doesn't, that's just not what we need right now. We want to see things change, and so we do need to take that extra step in activism.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with what Selma said. You know, social media, it's like you just post things and, you know, it depends on your intentions. But like, you know, like people sometimes post like things about Black lives in the cause, like just to get credit or just to get fame or like just to like just so that they won't get like caught not doing it, just to like for the sake of their like dignity or their reputation. And like, you know, Black History Month is like every year, like we learn about, oh, Martin Luther King, civil rights movement, segregation, but it's like limited. It's like at a specific time in a specific unit at school. You just like the whole unit is like, it's just like about like European American history, like gaining independence from Britain. So like I really think that we need to dig like a little bit deeper in it. And like, you know, we usually hold Black history events every year at the in the Muslim community locally, but like at the same time, like our experiences aren't gonna like fade away. It's still there. We have stories to tell. Like we can't always just hear from like the same people every year. Like there are ordinary people who need to have a voice. Like we have like um we have celebrities talking about the cause, but like there are ordinary people who have been like trauma regarding injustice. And like I think what we need to do is like not tokenize Black people all the time to like, or like rely on us to like talk about these things at an event every February. I think we need to learn and address these issues ourselves and do our own research.
Yeah, I think that's very important. Going back to what Selma said about Blackout Tuesday, a lot of Black creator or a lot of non-Black creators just put out that Black square just to show like, oh, see, like I'm not racist. I am I am for the Black Lives Matter movement, but it wasn't really helping the Black Lives Matter movement. It actually degraded the people who are actually trying to do something. A lot of a lot of it was just kind of clouding over Black creators who are trying to put out something important and put their opinion out there. And even though you may think that you're just trying to do your best, and that's great that you do support us, you should think about what you're posting and just make sure that it's really helping the Black Lives Matter movement and not just showing that you're for us.
Yeah, I think it also goes to say that the main thing with the Black Lives Matter movement becoming so popularized now is that people are trying to get the point across that Black Lives Matter don't just matter now, they always matter, they have always mattered. And we need to get into that mindset where we have to recognize that Black people are marginalized. They go through so many different issues that we are not aware of because it doesn't concern us, it doesn't apply to us, we don't have any say in this because we don't really know about it, and we shouldn't be talking about it because why do we have to talk about it? It doesn't concern us. And I think it's important that we should be in Islam, we should be helping people of all races and making sure that everyone gets their basic human rights and they're not being killed based on their skin color. And so I think it's important for specifically like as a masjid to understand what social activism means and what does that look like. And
yeah, I think a lot of people, even myself, sometimes I feel like just for posting stuff, I just feel like I'm not doing enough. Like a lot of there are many times where I wanted to go to a protest, but I didn't have a ride, or things happened with my mom's car, and because I'm young, I can't even like drive yet. I just feel like I really can't do a lot of stuff. But the important thing to do is to think is just because you're young, it doesn't matter. You can still do so many things. And, the older you grow, the stronger you'll get. But even at this age, there's so much stuff you can do. It's just important to know that your opinion matters, and if you post something, it matters.
Yeah, so we need to remember that there's a world outside of social media, that not everyone is using social media, and that only certain members of the youth are. So that it's important to go outside, put up a few signs. Maybe if there are any rallies or protests in your area, you should research about it, join them, just do your part. You can't just post about it. But posting does help, but we can all do more than that.
I feel like the problem with social media is it trains you to feel like when you post something, like it's supposed to help you feel like you are doing enough. Like even if I go to a protest, I've seen a lot of instances where people are only going to these protests so they have something to post to their Instagram. So I feel like people need to understand that it's deeper than just the views you can get, or the comments you can get under a post. It's like this is a real movement that you really need to start speaking out against. So
yeah, also I think it's important to recognize that like the Black Lives Matter movement is not a political movement. It's a human rights issue. This is like a human rights movement. And I think a lot of people, especially older generations, typically kind of take a step back and don't want to talk about it because they think it's politics. But it's not. It's a human rights issue, and that's really important in Islam. And so kind of dismantling that ideology, I think, is also really important.
Yeah, I also think like what you were saying, a lot of people, because they're not seeing it on their feed or like on their on their just when they scroll through social media, they're not seeing like any Black Lives Matter posts. They think it's done, but like you said, Black Lives Matter always have mattered, and they always will. And it's just really important to always do what you can, and not just think it's like a one-time thing, because it's not just a joke. It's not just a thing that we get all riled up for and then just kind of dies down. It's a thing we have to keep going at, so then we can get to where we want to.
Thank you all. I think that you've really painted a clear picture of what what it means to do real, or the importance of doing real change, of participating in real change, not engaging in like token activism on social media, or just things during Black History Month. So now moving on towards kind of looking towards the future, and trying to see what exactly we can do together in the future. What specific suggestions do you have for people who are part of our institutions, our masajid, our community centers? What specific suggestions do you have for them on how those institutions are being run, what they're offering, including, for example, weekend schools, what types of things they're teaching at weekend schools, or how those types of projects are being run?
I would say, I guess the most important thing is to go one step above of what you're already doing. So like if you didn't know much about the Black Lives Movement, right, and this is like the first time you're hearing about this, start, I guess, the first step maybe go to social media, research some stuff, talk about with friends, right? If you already do that, maybe you should start posting on social media more consistently, okay? And if you're already a person that talks a lot about on social media, then you should step outside, join a few protests, right? And if you already do that, make sure you do that consistently. And then there's always like a level above and above and above. For basically, I'm saying that everyone can help if they can help more than what they already are doing.
I think in terms of like civic or like weekends, school or mass, I think it's important for kids our age to understand how important social activism is, especially when it comes to the Black Lives Matter movement, because we need to talk about inclusivity and like what does it mean to be inclusive and how we can be inclusive. Also, like how to be better allies. What does it mean to be an ally, and help educate them. Like I think it's really, really important for us to understand like Black history, because we live in America. We're different than our parents. We need to understand American history and how does that fit in with being a Muslim. How do we act on that? How do we educate ourselves? So yes.
Just something that like I kind of wanted to talk about, like I would say that kind of addresses like both the last two questions, is just the like beyond just like Black History Month events, and like, you know, to incorporate it into teaching even the next generation about like positive, you know, effective change for, and it is the responsibility like for these like weekend schools and for these like Islamic schools as well, because again, like everyone was saying, Black history and just, you know, the roles of Black people in Islam has been so large that like their stories need to be told as well. But beyond just like Black history, like you have to keep like the youth aware of like what's going on socially. Like for example, like if you don't teach your children about it, where are they going to learn like about what's going on around the world? Are they going to get a correct view of it? Like we were saying earlier, there's so much misinformation online. So like I think definitely that Islamic schools need to take a bigger role with like just teaching again the youth about what's going on. And then just again for like making positive effective change, like instead of just holding like, you know, one Black History Month event during, you know, the school year or whenever, take it into your like personal, your social and your academic circles. Like something that I did that was like way out of my comfort zone, but it's something that like I feel like really pushed me to do something positive, was like my freshman year of college in my public speaking class. I was like the only Muslim, the only hijabi. And then it was one of the speeches I decided to talk about the Black Lives Matter movement. And this was in like 2015. So it's been a couple of years since then. But I remember like walking out of it and like all these people were just staring at me. And I'm like, they obviously did not, either they did not know about this, or I don't know if they were like disagreeing with it or something. But it's those instances where you kind of have to push yourself out of your comfort zone. But when you have the situation, when you have the platform and you have the room, like to tell people, to educate them and to raise awareness, then you should be doing that. And as an Islamic school, I think they do have that platform. So incorporate it into your curriculum, like somehow, like try to incorporate like maybe once, like every 2 weeks or once a week, talk about like what's happening around the world, like social justice issues. And then dedicate like regularly trying to ensure that when it comes to Islamic studies, like make sure to incorporate those minorities, those hidden figures in Islam who did play bigger roles than we're taught usually. So that's just my suggestion.
Yeah, going off of what Yusra said, I think it's important for kids to like also see what is the Islamic perspective on issues, what is the Islamic value, like not only for like the Black Lives Matter movement, not only current events that are happening in America, but like overseas, for example, what's happening in Yemen and other countries. Like I personally didn't understand the Yemen crisis. I wasn't ever taught it. I had to do my own research, and I still don't have the best understanding of what has been going on or what has been happening. And I think it's really important as like community members, especially like Muslims, to understand what is happening and like what is Islamic perspective, what is Islamic view on these issues, and how should we act upon it.
Yeah, I agree. I also feel like when I wasn't told something and I had to find out for myself, it was just kind of hard, because as you guys said earlier, of course, social media isn't always the best way to find out about things. And if I'm trying to do my own research, I may find something that isn't true. And a lot of kids who are trying to learn more about stuff, that's usually what they fall into. And so I think it's really important as adults who can find the right information to what's it called, help the next generation to understand what's going on and how they can, and tell them how they can help.
Thank you. And Any specific suggestions? Because I know that you mentioned, just raising awareness in general about injustices around the world. Because we're talking about racism in our community and specifically towards Black Muslims, what are some specific suggestions that you have for the masjid and for our institutions to become more inclusive of Black Muslims?
I think that, like, in weekend schools, I think, like, we should be more mindful of, like, who's there. Like for example, like Black children in, like, weekend schools, we get like even from a very young age, they get microaggressions, like, oh, this is your relative or this is your mom, because like they see another Black person, that's why they ask these questions. But that's not the point. The point is that, like, we should like understand other people's backgrounds, and just just understand that, like, not everyone's background is like the same as others. Like when it comes to like Islamic studies, we shouldn't just teach about Bilal radiallahu an. We should also we should also bring the topic of racism that's relevant in today's issue and how we should apply to it as Muslims. Like, we can't be like, okay, so like Bilal radiallahu anhu, he was a slave, and he, like, during the times of the Prophet, he like slavery has occurred, and it's like, that's not the point. Like, that it happened, but like we should know more of our Black companions. The first martyr during the times of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the first martyr was a Black woman. Her name is Sumayya. The Prophet, a Black woman, nursed the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whom he considered as his second mother. And we should also, like, racism is against Islam. Same as how bullying is, sexism is, slandering others. Racism is like not a taboo. We should learn it. We should know that it's not a taboo. We should learn people from early ages so that when we grow up in the world, the ummah like becomes more united, not divided, because there's division between races, cultures, and like opinions in our ummah. So we need to actually like educate them without like having this discomfort.
Yeah, also I think it's important to make sure that we give the Black Muslims in this community a platform and a voice to talk about certain issues or things that they feel is important that we should be more aware about. Just like even like in weekend school, for example, projects, or I think community board members should make sure that they reach out to the Black Muslims in this community and make sure that if they want to talk about something, they have a platform to do so. So yeah.
Yeah, just going off of that, I feel like a lot of Black Muslims think they're, feel like they're so misheard, and a lot of them are put down and told not to speak. And as Muslims, we can give them that platform. We shouldn't be over here, just like putting them away and not telling them to speak. We should encourage them to speak instead of doing what everyone else does and trying to silence them or weaken them.
Yeah, also like very specific, I think a specific suggestion, especially for right now, I think the masjid, they have like a website, right? It's important that they post petitions. There's a lot of petitions that need signatures. There's a lot of Black lives that have been murdered and their cases have been closed and their families haven't gotten justice. And so it's important for us as active social community members to sign those petitions and help that cause.
Yeah, I know petitions is like just something really easy that we can do. That only takes a few seconds and that we can do at home. And a lot of people, don't know about certain people, and with the something the masjid can do with their platform they can educate people, tell them, oh, this person needs you to sign the petition, and then put a link there. That's a very good way to just get the word around and have more people to sign it.
Also on top of petitions, also donations. I feel like it's important to donate where you can and put money into places, whether that be for protests or families in need of lost ones.
There's always a way you can help, even if you feel like there isn't a way. There always should be a way. If you don't, or if you honestly don't know how to help, you can ask your friends or any relatives that you have, especially for the youth. They should always have resources so that they can help the community.
Yeah, going off what Hozaifa said, I think the masjid posting these resources is a great way to be an ally towards the Black Lives Matter movement or any movement in general, making resources accessible to the Muslim community, especially those who don't necessarily know how social media works or how to reach petitions and other like donation campaigns. I think is important. Also, like posting like when there's protests and other things, I think that's important too as well, because a lot of like, at least my parents, there's like a CIMIC group chat or something like this, CEO announcements, like they're more on top of that, like as a resource, they feel that as that's a more trusted resource than compared to something that they would see on like Facebook or something. So
yeah, I agree with that. A lot of even a lot of people who a lot of older people in this community don't even have most social medias, and maybe they only know about the CIMIC page. They might not know if there's a protest or know what's going on, and because of that, of their platform, they can help.
Again, thank you for your really specific suggestions, and I hope that these are taken into consideration. I also wanted to add, perhaps just from what we heard earlier about, the fact that microaggressions have happened at the CIMIC Weekend School against, students of color. So do you all think that it would be useful to have, for example, anti-racist training for Sunday school teachers?
yeah, I feel like in schools they're doing that. They're understanding what institutionalized racism is, what are microaggressions. The club that I was in at school, I would meet up with the Unit 4 Director of Equity and Diversity, and so a lot of the Black students that were like in AP classes or were typically given a weird look or they feel out of place, and the teachers, when they made a survey, they said, so like they pay more attention to the Black kids because they have this preconceived notion that, oh, they're disruptive, or like it's very hard for them to like understand, like, oh wow, like a Black person is it.
I think we got a little bit of, maybe we got cut off, Selma. But yeah, thank you for mentioning that and mentioning the example of your school. So it really does look like other schools are, taking the initiative to provide this training to their teachers and helping their teachers become aware of their own biases, their unintended, microaggressions. So I think that's a good idea for our weekend schools as well. Selma, you're back with us.
Okay, yeah, my Wi-Fi. Did I get cut off completely?
Well, yeah, we heard about your school and how they've been implementing
yeah, so we did surveys for the teachers in terms of like how do they treat Black students in their class, and it was all like, oh yeah, but they think that Black kids tend to get more in trouble, so they focus on them more, or when they see Black students in like AP classes, they're more surprised, and they pay attention to them more to make sure they're not messing around or doing anything, while the white kids in the same class do the same thing, but they get let off the hook. Or in terms of punishment, if there's a Black student and there's a white student and they fought, for example, the Black student typically gets the more harsher punishment, while the white kid typically gets left off the hook. And so they did a whole survey, and it was all anonymous, and these teachers basically confessed this. So these teachers who are supposed to be your educators have already this implicit bias. And so I think, so then everyone's going through training. So I think it's important, those who are teaching at CIMIC, those who are teaching in general should go through training and understanding what is institutionalized racism, what is internal racism, what is implicit bias, what are microaggressions, to make sure they act in a way that be a good role model of what it means to be inclusive of all their students.
Thank you for sharing that. And we're moving now to our very last question. Just an open-ended question of what would you like to say to people who don't fully understand the importance for our ummah to be ahead of the game in fighting inequality for African Americans? What would you like to say to those individuals who may not fully understand the importance of this issue?
I think it's really important just to say that, just try to educate yourself. Try to understand, try to find someone who has been through, hard acts of racism and ask them, try to learn from them. Don't be arrogant and be very open-minded, because that's the only way you're going to grow. And if you're going to be closed-minded, if you're not going to be willing to learn from anyone else, then that's the way that you're going to be held back, and that's only affecting you, not anyone else.
Also, I feel like understanding your position in your community and like what you can do to help change, whether that be speaking out against something that's wrong, or you putting together a protest or something, like just understanding that you can do something to change and you have the power to do that, that's someone else in your own community might not be able to do.
Yeah, I would say that like this issue has happened like years ago, it's been a long time, and it's okay to talk about these issues. It's okay to actually like understand, like it's not a taboo, like I said before. Like it's like the ummah will be more united than ever if we talk about the issues that some of us have been brushing under the rug. Yeah, I think that I think the only way is to like talk to people, talk to different people, like talk to a Black person, like understand what they're going through, just not judging or criticizing or questioning anything. It's their experience. We should emphasize what people are going through, not only what people are going through, but what's really happening. Because we may see racism as a Black and white issue, but there is racism in like other countries, in the Middle East or in South Asia and anywhere. Racism exists everywhere. We need to acknowledge I think people need to acknowledge the privileges they have, because racism is not like only an American thing. It's also a global thing, and the thing like in our religious communities and also in our cultural communities. That's how we have colorism in our own groups, ethnocentrism, and racial pride. So I really think that we need to actually, I would say like just emphasize, like don't question, just learn from it and address it. And when you address it, it makes your community even better and stronger than before.
Yeah, going off of what Khadija said, I think a lot of times because we don't experience it, we don't think it happens. And so we go out there and understand the experiences that Black Muslims go through, but also in terms of like, if they don't understand the importance, it is an Islamic value to stand up for those who are oppressed, for those who are experiencing injustice. This is an Islamic value. And as people who believe in Islam, as people who are Muslims, we should be doing that. We should be acting that way. And always remember, silence is violence. If we're standing and like not supporting those who are oppressed and making sure that they have their support, we're just as bad as the people who are the oppressors. And also, like, alhamdulillah, as people who are living in America, and we have means and the accessibility to create change, to go to protests, to go sign petitions. In some Arab countries, they don't necessarily have that freedom. So it's really important for us to take advantage of that. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. One thing to also mention is not to tell a Black person how to feel when when so many people are dying of police brutality. So many people are getting hanged, people are getting shot, people are being choked to death. It's really important to not what's it called, like demean a Black person's way of feeling. If they feel sad, if they feel angry, you shouldn't tell them, oh, don't get sad, you're too sensitive, or oh, why are you being so angry. You should let them be able to feel whatever they want to feel, because right now there's just a lot happening, and you just really need to be not so insensitive.
Yeah, going back to what Selma was saying, that basically we can't really judge the people for example, the riots, right? Everybody's talking about, wow, those riots are so bad. They're like, we can't really blame them, because the things that are done to them was overall much worse than overall what they're doing right now. And I said this in a different time, but like, the riots are just like a symptom of the oppression. It's not like correlated. It's the reason all this violence is happening is because of the oppression that's happening then from the past, and the oppression that's happening right now. It's more of a, yeah, sorry. One more thing I want to add. Some people say it could like even lead to like a form of like a revolution in some sort of way. So we should be thinking about that way instead of just a riot.
So yeah, I mean, like, kind of based off of like what Selma was saying, definitely, like, just kind of speaking directly to my like fellow Arabs. I mean, it's very easy to be like, well, this doesn't directly affect me, why should I worry about it, kind of like Selma was saying. But in the Muslim like community, yeah, you might be a minority throughout the rest of America as a Muslim or as an Arab, but within the Muslim community, you do serve like you're kind of like the dominant or the major community that's present in this like Muslim community. So it's on us, on us as the majority here to like use this space and to help those around us, because again, you kind of have the bigger like platform here. So like as Muslims, as Arabs, like especially as Muslims though, it is on us to like help our fellow brothers and sisters in their times of injustice and their times like of need. And that's like for you as a Muslim, like that's your role, that's your responsibility. And like in situations where like, again, it's uncomfortable to talk about these issues, you have to be aware and be mindful, like this is someone's personal subjective experience. You can't be the one to tell them like, no, that didn't happen, or no, you can't do this, or you're being overly sensitive or overly dramatic. Like, you can't gaslight people. You need to let them speak their experiences, and then you need to use your role as like the person who has like majority here to help your brothers and sisters in Islam figure out ways to fix this injustice. And so yeah, just because like, again, this isn't an issue directly affecting you as a Muslim, it's your responsibility to stand for all of those who are facing any injustice.
Thanks everyone for your very articulate responses to that question, that very difficult question of what we would tell people who don't already understand the significance and the importance. And I hope that your words do carry forward to individuals to help change their perspectives, but also hopefully, help them change the institutions that we look up to, and hopefully that type of change is a much more structural change, a much more lasting change. And inshallah, we hope that this is the beginning. This is not the end, even though this is part 3 of our series, but we hope that this is the beginning of more structural and real change. So I want to thank you all again for being here, for your time. Thanks for everyone who has watched this panel, and we really hope that each and every person who's watched this can carry it forward and can do something with it. And I thank you again, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum.
So we'll be live in just a second. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you everyone for tuning in. We just listened to the recording that we had of the webinar a few days ago that we recorded, and now we will be taking questions from the audience. So our first question was submitted on YouTube in the comments section. And so right now we have with us 3 of the panelists. So we have Khadija with us, Salma Alamin, and Hozaifa. And we will, first of all, look at the questions that were submitted on the YouTube. The first one has to do with Lateef's experience, which unfortunately he isn't able to be with us right now. So we will have to move to the second question. So the second question has to do with the comment is racism is a crime against humanity. Why should we be respectful? You mentioned at some point during the webinar, we were talking about the importance of being respectful to especially elders. So how would you respond to this idea that the injustice that happens is absolutely disgraceful, absolutely unacceptable? How would you respond to, this very valid comment about, how we deal with people who are not understanding? It's a very difficult question, but excited to hear your thoughts.
Assalamu alaikum. Sorry, my speaker should be working now.
It is, yes.
Yeah. So I kind of missed that last part. What did you say?
Okay, so we are just taking questions now, and the first one had to do with the comment was racism is a crime against humanity. Why should we be respectful? So we were talking at a certain point in the panel, we were talking about the importance of being respectful when addressing elders, especially.
I guess, okay, if no one's gonna say me, I guess I'll start off with a lot of the time people just don't know, like they really, I don't know, they're like arrogant, or like they just really just don't know why what they're doing is wrong. And in that case, if you know that they just don't know, you should, be as nice as possible. But sometimes people do know and they just don't care. And I guess in that instance, you have to take a little bit more force. But being nice, it really just only works for people who really just don't know why what they're doing is wrong and just need someone to help them.
Yeah, also to go along with that, when you are trying to like educate someone or try to prove to someone a certain point, if you do it in a respectful manner, it's more likely that they'll try to understand what you're saying and actually accept what you're saying. But if you come in a aggressive manner, they're just going to attack your aggressiveness. They're not going to listen to what you're saying, and then they're just going to be defensive rather than trying to like open their mind and understand what you're trying to say. So our main goal is to create long-lasting change, and we're trying to educate people. And so if that means for us to be respectful, then that's the way to go about it. But again, if someone comes at you disrespectful, then you would come with the disrespectfulness. But if someone's just saying their opinion, you should argue a point respectfully.
To add on to that, nobody's gonna listen to you, unfortunately. If you even if you're saying the right thing, if you're being disrespectful and just like spewing, like just saying a bunch of insults or anything like that, it's not gonna help the cause at all. It's not gonna help the argument, even though what you might be saying could be correct. Just we want to, inshallah, once this problem eventually like dissipates, we don't want to like win this argument choosing by being rude. We want to win this argument by being better. So, yeah.
Thanks for your insights. I think this is definitely an issue that, you know, we are all grappling with. I think each and every one of us is really grappling with how we go about actually addressing people who are unfortunately part of the problem, not part of the solution. And I think it's a real tension, and we have to kind of continue to think and struggle with how exactly we do, you know, address these issues, because at the same time, yes, we want to be respectful for sure, and that is a prophetic character trait in general. At the same time, we also know, like you said, that, you know, when someone is disrespectful, sometimes we have to be assertive, and we have to let them know this is not okay. It's not going to be accepted. I want to welcome Salma El-Naggar and Lateef Bridgewater for joining as well. I didn't have a chance to welcome you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum
Assalamu
salam.
alaikum, everyone.
Walaikum salam. Thank you.
Alaikum salam.
Thanks, everyone. And so now that Lateef is here, I don't know if Lateef, did you get a chance to see the comment that was directed at you?
Yeah, I did see it. I mean, I can speak on it. So basically, someone that was really close to our community and someone that I've known for a few years. So basically, me and my brother, we were on Instagram and we seen that someone that we had known did blackface from Muhammad. So we decided that, like, we want to speak out on, and we want to, you know, like, show people like what was going on, and like it was unacceptable. And someone in our Muslim community spoke out and was like, oh, well, if you guys are hurt by a word, if you guys are hurt by someone's actions, you should just get over it. And she decided to go live with one of her friends, and who was also Muslim, but from Chicago. And they were basically just going back and forth, calling us monkeys and gorillas, you know, saying that, you know, we were the N word with the hard R, just, you know, like blatantly being disrespectful and racist to us for 20 minutes on an Instagram live publicly. So we tried to, you know, privately educate them, you know, tell them like, yo, like, I've known you, like why would you do something like this? And basically privately through like direct messages, she was, you know, still like, oh, like, I don't care how you feel. So unfortunately we had to make it public. And, you know, a lot of people seen the video, and I feel like a lot of people didn't know that it was directed right towards us. It was something that she was saying directly towards us, calling us the N-word and calling us gorillas and stuff. So I'm not gonna, you know, say that this is the whole community, because it's really not, but I feel like a lot of people should be more aware and more willing to speak out about what was said and what happened in the situation.
Yeah, the argument that like it's just a word doesn't really make sense, because like our whole society is based on words. We read words all the day, we say words, right? Our entire communication system is based on words. Like my dad commonly says that like your whole entire life can change with one typo, which shows that how important the significance of saying a wrong word and a good word is, right? So we can't just make that argument that it's just words, you don't get over it or something like that.
Yeah, also the fact that she was definitely coming from a very privileged point, like the where she's hot out. Wait, for her to just say like, oh, it's just a word, you guys shouldn't be like freaking out over a word, was like very much coming from her privilege point, and the fact where like she doesn't have to experience racism like Black people do. She doesn't really experience the same microaggressions Black people do, and it was also like she was trying to relate to herself to like certain like how what Black people go through. Like she was saying, oh, people call us like sand, and she said the N-word, and so it just shows how there are some people clearly not understanding the issue and understanding, like we said in the video, like they don't understand the implications of certain racial slurs, and they, again, because of their privileged perspective and viewpoint, think it's just a word.
Yeah, going off from what Selma said, like, and also Hozaifa, you know, just one word can affect like someone else's feelings and like how they feel about it. And like, I don't know, when the person like, you know, said the whole thing on Instagram Live, you know, it was like a wake up call that, you know, anyone can be racist. Like it can happen. Like when you're like saying bad things and online and just like saying offensive terms like for fun, in general, whoever does that, they're doing it themselves, and like having the same level of like calling them out um and just like pointing an example of like how racism kills and like how it's also a part of a pandemic. So I really think that it's important to like call like people out for racism and like any injustice, like, you know, call out injustice, speak against injustice with your hands, if not with your mouth, and if you can't do them, hate it in your heart. So like I really think that like we should see like the reality behind some things in a community, whether it's religious or any other community. So I really think that it's important to not cover it up.
Thanks everyone for your input. It's so tragic to know that something like this has to happen before we talk about it, or we, you know, have these types of important conversations. I wanted to ask, what do you think we need to do proactively? What do you think adults need to do proactively, even before things like this happen? Just for example, in weekend schools, in different programming that maybe the mosque holds, what types of things can we do proactively?
The first thing they should probably do is like convince themselves that the racism is a problem, right? That this is a prevalent issue that's happening to maybe even your friends or sometimes even to yourself, unfortunately. And once they convince themselves, they can get the first step, right? I said like the previous time, maybe start going to your social media, start talking to friends, learning about the problem, or find some protests, to go to the CIMIC, talk to the people there. Just anything can help, really. The most important thing is that you convince yourself first that it's a problem. And then
going off of what Hozaifa said, racism, like it's taught, and so it's important for parents to educate their kids about what is happening. Like, while we are Muslims, we do live in America, and it's important to understand what's going on in the community around us. Why is it harmful? Why is this happening? What is police brutality? What is the Black Lives Matter movement? How did slavery come about? Why are these certain racial slurs not okay? Why are these microaggressions not okay? And because that will create a more respectful, inclusive environment. But if you're at home and you're not educated on these issues, and you might say certain racial slurs, certain microaggressions that you think are okay because no one's told you otherwise, your kids are going to think, are also going to think that that's okay. And then when they're around people in certain environments who know it's not, that's when they're going to get called out. So to just prevent that from happening in general, it's important to teach that at home. And you can do it in several ways. You can do it from the Islamic perspective. You can make your kids watch the news and understand what all these terms mean, what microaggressions mean, implicit bias, institutionalized racism, internalized racism, because now during this time, this is when everyone's becoming more aware of these social issues and problems.
I also, to go off that, I feel like also including Black students and letting Black students know that they're involved. And although you may have, in, more public schools, you might have a white teacher, or, in Dean, which is Selma's a part, it's like, you don't have to be a Black person or a Black American to speak out on something that's wrong. Let students know, this is going on in the world right now, and it's wrong, just guide, rather than shying away, guide your Black students and peers as well.
Yeah, just going off of what Selma and Lateef said, really whenever you have that advantage of being by a large group of children, or, your like, let's say you're a teacher, or you babysit, or you have nieces or nephews, or little cousins. It's just so important to make sure that they know what's wrong and what's going on, so that when they grow up, because they're gonna be the future. They're gonna be the people who are fighting against injustice. You have to tell them from where it stems, from home. When something's going on, you have to tell them about it, and you have to teach them how to fight against it.
Thank you. And we just also got a question submitted. So this question says, what would you say to immigrants who feel that they have come to this country and been able to establish privileges, work hard to establish privileges? So why can't Black Americans do the same? So what would you say to someone who puts forth that type of an argument?
Well, Black Americans, there's so much history involved with why they don't have the same privileges, with why they don't have the same freedoms as us or white people or any other minority. It's just so heavily rooted in their history. There's slavery, and then there was segregation and Jim Crow laws. Like, their freedom has always been delayed. I think we talk about this in the video, but like, Black people, their freedoms have always been delayed in this country, always. And it's because of the system. It's the system. For us as immigrants, alhamdulillah, we benefit from the system. Black Americans don't benefit from the system. The system has always been against them. And so they're having this fight over 100 years later because of the fact that the system is broken and the system does not help them. So they're trying to fight against the system because the time is now up. Time's up. They've been tired. They're angry. They don't see any change happening. They tried peaceful protesting. Nothing has happened. And so this is the time where they're fighting back, and they need our support as a community. So yeah.
Yes. That was, wow, that was awesome. That was a great question. But, I'm a first generation West African child. Like, my parents were immigrants. They came for education opportunities, but like, still, as Black people, we go through different experiences, and like minorities, like, I'm not saying they haven't been through racism, but like, when it comes to privileges, like financially and socially, that's very true. Because I'm pretty sure, like, when it came to history, as what Selma said, Black people came to this country as slaves. And, we've been living in these conditions for generations. Even right now, there's still poverty. The system's it's by the system too, yeah? But like, we have most immigrants coming from, Asian countries or Arab countries. Most of them are looking for like degrees in like, other fields of study and education in America. So yes, we have to, acknowledge our privileges, and like, we go through racism differently.
Yeah, like, just like Khadija said, most of us come here because we're like pursuing a PhD. Our parents came here because they're pursuing a PhD program, and that in itself is a privilege. You were blessed with that. Alhamdulillah, you were blessed to come here. Yeah, not all Arabs come here because of education. Sometimes they're misplaced. There's war in their countries and they come here. But most of us, especially people who come to Urbana-Champaign, most of them like went to UVI for education and got their degrees from here. And so that in itself is a privilege that Black Americans never had the experience of. So yeah.
And I also I do love the question, but I feel like a big part of the problem that we deal with is my fight versus yours. I mean, like, obviously there's, immigrants who deal with issues every single day. And, we're not fighting against that. We're fighting our struggles while we're fighting yours on top of that. So I feel like it's, personally, in my view, in the way that I've, dealt with my own movements, it's like, they're together, and it's not something that you can break apart.
Yeah, I agree with that. Also, it's just that for almost, the entirety of America, the system is just so rooted in there, and the system is made for only white people. A lot of the times, people who are in charge, which are mostly white people, like old white men, and specifically, are in favor of the system, and it works for them. So why would they change it? And because of that, a lot of because of that, for such a long time, Black Americans have had to struggle, because the system was not made for them, and for probably a very long time, the system isn't going to change because it's so enforced in there.
Yeah, I think, as everyone else nicely put, it's kind of the system is against them. It all boils down to a form of like institutional racism, where because the questionnaire asked why the Black Americans don't get the same rights, and the truth is they should get the same rights. It's just that, like as everyone else nicely said, that if the whole entire system is against them, it's difficult to actually get any change done, which is why there are like some riots happening, and there's a combination of riots and peaceful protest. And alhamdulillah, some good things have come out of these stuff, right? But there's still a long way to go before like we can say that everyone's like equal in these privileges.
I also think it's important to realize the difference between equality and equity. We all have the same opportunities, all equal opportunities, but we don't have the same means and opportunity to get those certain things. So like, for example, equity basically means like you are given certain resources to reach your goal. Like, for example, the main issues like white Americans here, their families, because of generations, they have more trust funds, they have more opportunities to go to college, while Black Americans, they didn't really necessarily have the opportunity to get into the workforce until much later, like around the 1920s, 30s. And so that's the thing. It's not that Black Americans don't do anything to like, they haven't done anything or like put the work. That's it. They do. It's the issue is that they are not given the same. It's harder for them to reach those same opportunities. Black Americans have to work harder to get the same opportunities and the same resources and jobs as compared to white people, compared to other minorities in general. And so I think it's really important to acknowledge that. It's not like Lateef said, it's not our fight versus theirs. It's more like their fight at the moment is more important because of the fact that their freedom has always been delayed. They're not supporting Black people and supporting Black Lives Matter movement you're not diminishing like other people's struggles. It's more just like they need the more support because they've been going through this issue for so long and no one's ever talked about it, and it hasn't really changed.
Going back to what Selma said about people having the same opportunity but not having the same means to use those opportunities, it reminds me, like, I remember that many slaves, unfortunately, once they're initially freed, and like the problem was that they didn't have like food, they didn't have water. Some even wanted to go back into slavery because the argument was that back then they at least had people to feed them. So it is honestly a really sad experience because even when they're freed, their lives were still really they didn't have the same privileges as other people did. That's the main problem.
Yeah, I remember talking about that on the panel about how even though they were freed, it was basically the same thing because they weren't given any resources to go out there. They didn't have any money to go out in the world to make their own house or anything like that, and they were really just put out there to fail because they were stolen away from their original place, and then they were brought here with only one job to do, and now all of a sudden they were just taken away from that. And it was from the beginning they were just put out there to fail.
Yeah, like imagine you're enslaved for like, I don't know, 100 years, and then you don't have any rights, basically, no education, you don't know anything. All you know how to do is like this one certain job, whether it's picking cotton or you're a maid or something. And so then you're just like freed, and you're not given any resources, any guidelines. Like when we go to when we shift from middle school to high school to college, we're given certain resources that help you succeed, or who should you go to if you need help with this or that. They never got that. They just freed them, and they just kind of, left them, and came in Jim Crow, and came in segregation laws, and then barrier after barrier was put upon them, and so that continued to delay them from reaching the same goal point as white Americans. Yeah.
Thank you again. I'm just so grateful that you all are able to share with us all of the rich, knowledge and perspective, because maybe it might seem obvious to you, some of the things you're saying, but believe it or not, adults need to be reminded of these very simple things. But I know that we are coming to an end with the time, so I wanted, before I give you all a chance to offer closing remarks, I want to give each and every one of you a chance to offer closing remarks. I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank Sisters Suya and Sisters Taqiyya, and also Sister Fatima and the CIMIC Seminar Committee and the CIMIC team for really organizing this panel. Sisters Suya and Taqiyya did a great job with, organizing the entire Racism in Our Community 3-part series. And like we said near the end of the recording, we really hope this is a beginning. And so I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank everyone who's listening right now, and then thank you, the panelists. So with that, I would like to invite each of you to offer closing remarks, and I'll just go again by alphabetical order. So Lateef, do you have closing remarks?
Yeah. I think that this whole entire series is, an amazing thing, just because it personally gave me, I feel like it was said, but this is my first time where I've been able to assert myself as a African-American Muslim in our community. And I think it's important to be able to have these conversations and, build something within, community that I personally grew up in. So I think it's amazing. I do want to say thank you for letting me be a part and, letting me say my piece and tell my stories. So.
Thank you. We're really glad to have you and your perspective. And again, we hope this is just a beginning. It's just, this should be the norm, right? So inshallah, it will be the norm starting now. Selma Alamin.
Yeah, basically what Lateef said is just, I think it's really important that we start doing this like as a norm, and we start reaching out to Black Muslims and letting them tell their story, because they were put down for so long. And as Muslims, we should with our religion, we should be doing that, and we should be the ones who are fighting for minorities like ourselves.
Inshallah. Thank you, Selma. Khadija.
Yeah, I'm really happy we got to do this series, especially during COVID-19. I'm thankful to have a local masjid, and we can get to talk about these issues and express how we feel about them. And yeah, I'm really happy to have seen this, because even though we're not going back to normal fully, but we're still having a platform, and I'm happy to have seen it and just participate in it. And yeah, so hopefully we'll change and be better people, and have a better community, and be more understanding and being mindful of others. And I'm really happy to have the opportunity to talk about my experiences, being a Black Muslim female. And I'm happy that I got the chance. So I'm thankful, and I really am looking forward for more greater things.
Alhamdulillah, we're thankful for your participation. I think Hozaifa.
Yeah, I want to say Jazakallah to everyone. I hope that we could like impart some knowledge to some people who didn't know anything about this. And I also learned a lot of new stuff in doing this panel meeting. So if I were to say one thing, I realized that talking about this stuff and kind of people get upset, like the whole entire system's against them, right? So like you might think there's like no hope, right? But the truth is that there's no better time than the present. The Black Lives Movement kind of got like rejuvenated recently, and like there's no better time to learn about this stuff than now. So you shouldn't be afraid to like go out there, learn some stuff, teach other people stuff. And I just wanted to say again, this is a very good meeting, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah, thank you so much, Hozaifa. And last but not least, Salma El-Naggar.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think this was a great way to educate our community, especially because people look to the mosque and the events at the mosque hosts as a trusted resource. And it was a really great way to amplify young voices and Black voices. And I hope people take what we said. It's a good discussion. It's always great to have discussions and see different people's perspectives and viewpoints. But I really hope the masjid takes like some of our ideas and suggestions, especially in regarding to like the masjid has a website. It would be great to see like them posting petitions, certain donation campaigns for Black Lives Matter movement, for the Yemen crisis, for other issues that are happening in the world, and also posting resources on how to be a better ally to Black people and how to just be more inclusive in our community. Because again, because so many people look to the mosque as this trusted resource, I think it would be a great way to use their what is it called? Like their
Platform.
Yeah, platform to educate their community.
I agree. Great, thank you so much. May Allah reward you all. And again, thank you for your time. And Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Alaikum.